This particular video I'm going to send out to my friends with the California 18, Renee Weiler, hi Renee, and Billy Powers. The Mortgage Electronic Registration System, ALTA, the American Land Title Association, and the American Continental Title Insurance Company. Now, Renee and Billy, I want you to pay close attention. My parents were in the real estate business in New York going back to the late 1950s and even earlier. My grandfather, great-grandfather were always swapping and trading in some kind of land or business, going back to the 20s and further than that. But without getting boring, I spent a lot of time in Houston, Texas, and was quite familiar with the Sharpstown banking scandal of the late 1970s, the Texas Rent-A-Bank scandal, the I-35 condo scandals up in Dallas, the Colonial House scandals with the Housing and Urban Development Department. That was Mel and Stephen Powers. And then, of course, you had the Couch mortgage swindles of Dean Couch. He was famous for multiple first lien positions on one piece of property. He went down for $40 or $50 million, along with quite a few other people in Houston, Texas, that were involved in some of the most interesting and egregious real estate scheming and scamming, dirt dealing as it's called, in Arkansas, like what the Clintons were doing with the Arkansas Industrial Development Bank, which there are a lot of these industrial development parks and industrial development financial corporations all over the United States. And this is one reason I'm wearing my Jim McDougal hat. Everybody knows that the federal prison outside of Dallas refused to give Jim McDougal his nitroglycerin the morning he died. I think it was the day before he was supposed to begin testimony against the Clinton real estate empire of Quapaw Title, the Wade Real Estate Company, and Ozark Realty. All involved at some level or another with the American Continental Title Insurance Company. Now, for Billy's benefit and for Renee's, information, my mother, her sister Doris, was married to the president of the Continental Insurance Company, and you'll find the history of Continental Insurance, American Continental Title Insurance, as in American Title, First American Title Corporation. You'll find their history quite fascinating, and it is in fact part of my family history. Now, to move along here, I worked back in the 1990s, the early 1990s. I was recommended to work for the American Priority Resources Corporation of Marty and Brian Brewer. Brian was a financial, how could you put it? He wasn't really a broker, but he was involved with financial brokering and with financial reporting with Green Tree Mortgage and TRW Financial Services at Greens Point out by the Houston Intercontinental Airport. And Marty was the daughter of a rather interesting Italian family from Ohio. And I'm not going to say any more about Marty because Mama raised no fools. But in short, I worked as a title abstractor for American Priority Resources, in 28 states for the FDIC, the FBI, Department of Justice, all the taxing entities, the FSLIC, in the aftermath of the crash of the savings and loans and the banks in the 1970s and 80s. The history of falsifying land titles to obtain mortgage loans and construction loans and interim type financing and bridge loans, and there's so many different types of financial products that you can use the collateral of real estate to obtain. You could write an encyclopedia on it. Which brings me to a point. I wound up in federal court in Houston in Judge Lynn Hughes' court in 1987 or 88, somewhere in there. The case wound up in the early 1990s. First federal lawsuit I ever filed. I got their money and I got my home, and all of my neighbors, over 125 families that lived all around me in this particular subdivision in Montgomery County, Texas, they got their homes free and clear as well. They got quiet title, basically. Now, to focus on a very large taxing entity, Hurd, Goggin, Blair, and Williams, a large tax collection firm. They operate all over the United States. In fact, they operate around the world, and that's part of the Jim Blair, very good friends with the Clintons, Jim Blair and Nelda Luce Radabaugh Blair, the debutante heiress to the Luce real estate fortune in Montgomery County in southeast Texas, basically. I'm sure Sue Luce has money everywhere, but she's no longer amongst the living, I don't believe. Nelda Radabaugh Blair, Nelda Luce Radabaugh Blair, she worked for Ted Turner over at CNN, the cable news network. I got the unique privilege, I suppose, to get to know Nelda Radabaugh Blair when she was working for the Montgomery County Attorney's Office in Conroe, Texas, where history was made. Billy, history was made when I exposed all those real estate schemes and scams all over Texas and Florida and Utah and Hawaii and Alaska and the Carolinas and Missouri and New York and up in Maine and all over the world. These multiple financial encumbrances against singular pieces of property. Well, that's something that Dean Couch and Couch Mortgage got busted for back in the late 80s and prosecuted in the early 1990s. And yes, Renee, and yes, Billy, there's so many judges and lawyers and sheriffs and federal agents and U.S. attorneys, you wouldn't even believe it, who's involved in all this stuff. Well, I take that back. I think you would believe it. Even presidents of the United States, which sort of brings me to the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, and of course Donald J. Trump. These public officials have been so bought by these financial corporations that Reckless Endangerment was written by Gretchen Morgenson and a fellow by the name of Rossner of the New York Times. Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporters wrote a book, Reckless Endangerment. Professor William Black, my tip of the hat to Bill Black. I've known Bill Black for, I don't know, going on 35, 40 years now. Back in my day, I was dealing with Henry B. Gonzalez, Phil Graham, Senator John Tower, and United States Attorney General William French Smith and Ed Meese. At one point with Governor Ann Richards. I mean, we're talking ancient history, Billy. This goes way back. These hocus, people think I'm kidding around when I say hocus pocus MERS, but I'm not kidding around. You can look that up on Facebook. It's an actual site. It's called Hocus Pocus MERS, and I think you'll appreciate that, Renee and Billy. At this particular juncture, I'm in Tennessee, up to my eyebrows in snakes. I mean, it's absolute snakes in these real estate schemes and scams. You got all kinds of public officials with multiple mortgages, and of course they're using the unlawful detainer courts, as you mentioned, and They're just robbing people's homes left and right. But here's the unique insight into this particular video. You see, if you take a bunch of salt, this is that pink Himalayan salt, and then you mix it all in with a bunch of just regular old sand, and you mix it all together, you can't tell it apart. I mean, it looks like salt. Is it salt or is it sand? You know, it's kind of hard to tell, right? But when you take a whole bunch of dirty, filthy lucre, dirty money, and you mix it in with a bunch of legitimate, clean money, you know, you can loan it out into the mortgage market and clean it up real easily. This is how the money's being laundered. Currently in Europe and all over the United States, and I guess all around the world, we're discovering the largest banks in the world, like JP Morgan Chase, like Wells Fargo, like Bank of America, and especially old Deutsche Bank, Danske Bank there from, I guess Dansk is from Russia, if I'm not mistaken, or Germany, one of the two. These huge banks are laundering so much money while at the same time providing massive loans and preferential financial benefits to people like Donald J. Trump. This is where the problem lies, Billy and Renee, is you've got some of the most powerful politicians in the history of the United States that are involved in this up to their eyeballs. Now, I want to pull some rank on a couple of people here and mention a couple of names. Montgomery County Judge Alan B. Sadler. He was with First Bank Conroe in Montgomery County, Texas for years. He knows I know what I'm talking about here. Old Judge Sadler, he gets it. If Whitson B. Etheridge, old W.B. Etheridge is still around, he was a trust attorney, a real estate lawyer for some of the big oil and gas companies in Texas, and his offices were in Conroe, Texas. I'd like to give a shout out to Mark Thurnbull. He's the deed recorder from Montgomery County, Texas. And J.R. Moore. I don't know if J.R. Moore is still the tax assessor collector in Montgomery County. This is now just immediately north of Houston. So these people are engaged in large-scale real estate recording, real estate taxation. I almost said real estate racketeering, which I think that might apply in some of these cases. It's massive in Houston, Texas, just like it is in LA, just like it is in Chicago and around Miami and around New York City, Salt Lake City, Utah, Honolulu, you know, the Hawaiian Islands. Oil and gas, mineral rights, massively involved here. Renee Weiler, Billy Powers. Remember I said REEs. That's rare earth elements. Oil and gas and REEs, the mining industry, and the minerals, oil and gas speculators in the world are massively involved in these real estate schemes and scams, which brings me to another point, and that was the bombing of the Murrah building in Oklahoma City, the Murrah Federal Courthouse. There was huge numbers of records associated with lots of oil and gas litigation and real estate fraud cases, resulting in somebody wanting to get rid of all that evidence, and the Murrah Federal building wound up blown up. I think there was a lot of mortgage and real estate and financial transactions in the World Trade Centers, particularly World Trade Center 7, that required it be pulled. They pulled World Trade Center 7. Everybody knows that. Larry Silverstein, right out of his own mouth, he said that they pulled World Trade Center 7. But let's keep this real with not any speculation. Everybody knows that trillions have vanished, and the epicenter of this massive disappearance of huge amounts of money, it's been what Renee Weiler and Billy Powers are talking about, real estate schemes and real estate scams. And God knows, and the FBI and the Congressional and Senate banking committees, I have so many witnesses, it's just staggering that I've been blowing the whistle on this nonsense since the earliest part of the 1980s. I don't know who would be a good Oh, I know who would be a great witness to what I just said, and that'd be Hillary Clinton. Or get a hold of George Bush Jr. I built his parents' hotel suite there at the Houstonian Estates across from Memorial Park in the 1980s. The history of Texas land swindles and Texas land frauds and Texas bank collapses and savings and loan scandals, it's legendary. And folks, the guy with the Jim McDougal hat on, well, by golly, he was right there and being written about in the Houston Chronicle and in the Houston Post, exposing all these less than lawful real estate speculation schemes. I learned a lot of stuff from watching how Dean Couch pulled it off with the Couch Mortgage Company, and there was Bobby Corson and Phil, I think it was George Mishner of the Allied Bank, and you had just copious numbers of people involved, from the former Assistant U.S. Attorney Henry Onken to Senator Phil Graham to Henry B. Gonzalez, Senator Lloyd Benson, and Ron Brown. Commerce Secretary Ron Brown was involved in this stuff quite a bit, along with, the Clintons and the Bushes and their little pals with the Triad Development Group of Khashoggi, Bin Laden, Gabanafar, Oliver North, Richard Secord, Admiral Poindexter, Bill Casey, John C. McCone. There's one for you, Renee Weiler and Billy Powers. Look up Western Banks and former CIA Director John C. McCone. And then you're going to start understanding the depth to which this financial industry controls the government. They own them, basically. I mean, they've given so much money to black operations, to the inner workings of the Central Intelligence Agency and DEA and all kinds of clandestine, off-the-shelf, stand-alone, do whatever the hell they want to, secret warfare like that which Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North began to explain to the Congress during the Iran-Contra investigations, which just, by coincidence, Secord and North were constantly down in Houston there at the Galleria in the hotel at night, taking up secret collections of large amounts of money, while the Secret Service and the FBI and Houston PD and so on and so forth were keeping prying eyes out of the hotel. Billy Powers, Renee Weiler, the California 18, William Wagoner, pay close attention, Bill, Professor William Black, and a couple of my old friends, Mark Lombardi. Mark Lombardi was the curator at the Houston Museum of Fine Art. Mark was a good friend of mine. He has a very interesting friend and a very interesting history, Mark Lombardi did. And then you had, let's name Peter Bruton of the Houston Post. That'd be an interesting personality to discuss. Catherine Austin Fitz, Linda Miner of the she was either Harris County Attorney's Office. Yep, Linda Miner. And then you had Brian Quigg, old Brian Quigg from the DCIA. He wound up under a piece of plywood. He got run down on a highway in Arizona back in the 90s. He was bringing a piece of plywood home for a plywood project, and for some odd reason, even though he was on the sidewalk, apparently, he got run down. Which brings me up to the infamous nail gun suicide of that fella that worked for the American Title Insurance Company. There was apparently a nail gun. He was shot 7 times with a nail gun during suicide when he was the owner of the American Title Insurance Company. Very interesting case. It was so interesting. YouTube shut my video channel down. I had hundreds of videos, Billy, hundreds, and Yahoo and Google and YouTube made sure I got silenced. I got censored, if you will, back in the 1990s, 1999, 2000. They totally wiped me out. So, I guess this particular video focuses on multiple crimes involving money laundering and swindling and cheating people out of their houses using subprime predatory mortgages. This is the heart of it. You see, you stub your toe, you miss a payment or two, and bang, they launder that money just grand. It's greatly effective to launder dirty money. Lots of writings, all kinds of links, and of course my wonderful network of friends all over the world, including Donald J. Trump and William Barr, of course, and the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray. I think it's time that there be some serious consideration. I got a nice phone call today from the United States Senate Banking Committee. Let me see if I can find that number here real quick. Let's see, it was 202-224-2654. That was the U.S. Senate Banking Committee. They apparently are quite interested in a lot of my writings and all of my wonderfully entertaining videos. So, well, I could go for months. I mean, I literally could keep going for months describing how the banks and the savings and loans and the pension funds and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, FHA and the Federal Home Loan Bank Board of Dallas, Texas, and just on and on and on. A lot of union pension funds and all kinds of federal employee credit unions. It just boggles the mind where they get the resources, the credit. It's credit. If you get into this discussion with Renee and with Billy, you'll understand that they're credit contracts. Money doesn't even really change hands. It's all computer keystrokes and balances and accounts in Dubai and Singapore and China. They love to move the money to Russia and Germany and the Cayman Islands and Panama. They love Panama. Ask William Wagoner. He'll tell you about the Panama connection. Folks, I suppose that I'm going to sum this up by a tribute to old Bobby Harmon of the Catbird's Nest. I think they called it the Catbird's Nest. Old Bobby Harmon. He was from Kentucky, but he worked out there in Hawaii for a long time. Bobby passed away a couple of years ago, and I'll never forget Bobby Harmon. He always called me professor, or he called me counselor, because he knew damn well that this guy with the old Jim McDougal hat, he's the real deal, the genuine article, the real McCoy. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, hasta la vista. God bless, and hey, kick this video over to the Senate Banking Committee and send it up to Maxine Waters and send it over to the FBI and the Department of Justice, and make sure Donald J. Trump gets his copy. You know, the Senate and Congressional Banking Committees have got a lot to explain, and there's two people tonight in America that know that's the truth. Her name, or these women's names, would be Renee Weiler, Billy Powers, and my old friend Carol Klein. Carol, I'm sorry. Carol knows. And wow, what a freaking trip, huh, folks? What a trip. Poof, presto, changeo, abracadabra, trillions vanished using these real estate schemes and scams. Folks, we'll leave it right there. God bless. Oh, and yes, we will definitely be back.